Up to this point in this lesson, Ms. Dovey has now shown you how to create an array of strings. This is the first time you've seen an array that has an object, a class data type in it. And you've seen how you can loop through that array, and just like you loop through any type of data in an array, you traversed the entire array and you can print out the object or the value at that position. In this video, I want to show you what is unique about working with an array of objects. Because the thing about objects, right, is that objects have more information than just their value. They also have methods that come with them. And so in this video, I'm going to demonstrate how you can actually access the methods that are relevant, or the methods that come from each of the objects within the array. Okay, so this is your general setup, and I've gone ahead and filled in these movie titles for you. These are classic movies: The Thing, I Was a Teenage Werewolf, The Blob, Godzilla, and Plan 9 from Outer Space. If you haven't seen any of these, highly recommend that you check them out. So then we're going to print out the movies at the top, and then here's our for loop, where we're actually going to loop through and print out all the movies that are in there. So we'll run this real quick to see that, okay, we've got our printout, the movies, and then all of our titles come out. So then I want to add on to this, printing out the length of each movie title. And so the way to do that, I'm adding a tab here so it has a little bit more spacing. So the way to do this is that I first want to reference the object at position I. And then this essentially is going to evaluate to that string. And then I can call the dot length method on that particular object. So these square brackets reference the string, and then the dot references the method that that string has. So if I do this correctly, I should get a printout of the name, followed by a tab, and then that length of that particular movie title. So let's try this. All right, 9, we have, give ourselves a little bit more room, 24, 8, 8, 23. Perfect, right? And so what's cool about this is that each time I'm calling .length, it's calling it for the specific movie title that I'm currently indexing in my array. All right, so let's say that instead of wanting to print out the name of each movie and the length, if I wanted to, say, print out the first and last letter of each movie title. So to do that, I can use another string method, which is substring. But because this is sort of a little more complicated and I'm actually going to need more code, I'm going to use some placeholder variables here to get this information extracted from each item in the array, and then I'll print it out. Okay, so first is going to be getting the first letter, and this is going to be using substring 0, 1 as our parameters. Right, again, we reference the movie at position I, and then we call .substring. So then, let's see if we can get the last letter. So getting the last letter is a little more complicated, because remember that every movie title is a different length. So I can't just hard code some numbers in here. I need to actually think about, okay, how can I get the last letter of a string that I don't know the length of yet? I have to use the length method. Right, again, calling it on that specific item, I.length. Remember, with strings, we use .length with parentheses. And then I'm going to subtract 1, because what we're doing here is we're getting the index of the last letter to the end. So that should give us our first and last letter. And then instead of printing out the title and the length, I'm just going to print these two things out. All right, so if we try this, we see that we have the thing, I was a teenage werewolf. Perfect. We've got all of our letters coming out. And so you can see here that what's powerful about a for loop going through an array of strings is that I've written only 3 lines of code, but I've managed to do an operation and perform it on 5 different strings, right? And so once I've written this generic algorithm, even if this array had 500 movie titles on it, I could apply this to every single one of them without having to write any more code, because using .length is generic, and using substring is a method that's going to be called on that specific item. All right, so that is sort of some examples of how to use methods on the strings that are in your arrays. It's now your turn to try out your skills and go ahead on to the coding activities and review questions for this lesson. Okay, folks, that brings us to the end of Unit 6, Lesson 3. I hope you were paying attention, because as Ms. Dovey mentioned at the beginning of this lesson, there are a few nuanced differences when you're working with arrays of strings or class data types as opposed to arrays of primitives, right? The most important one is that class data types are stored as a memory address, right? So anytime you are actually updating the values of those memory addresses, or if you pull one of those out, you're going to be getting a copy of the memory address, which still refers back to the original value. In this lesson, you learned how to do a few different algorithms on strings, and by using an array, you're able to take advantage of the fact that you could loop through and apply the same code or the same algorithms to all of the strings in that array.